Okay, we are back speedrunning from 500 to 2200 plus using the ready one knight f3 as white and the Nimzovich Sicilian as black. We are up to 1302 to start this session. Let's see how far we can go. We are playing 5 plus 5. Okay, we've got the white pieces. Knight f3. And we will go for g3. Opponent is setting up in one of the most common ways. All right, there you go for the Slav setup. Usually the bishop now comes out to f5 or g4 or e6. This is a semi-Slav setup. That's also reasonable. I guess I kind of like this to go for the plan of d3 and e4 versus the semi-Slav, kind of challenging those light squares. So let's give this a try. Now, kind of tempting to play e5 and push that knight back to e8. But alternatively, we can just keep developing, which is also, yeah, I think both options are good. Typical problem for black against the ready, getting this light squared bishop out. And even more so here, probably he should play e5 to get a foothold in the center. Okay, at this point, I think I'm going to play e5 myself and force that knight back, but also just prevent my opponent from doing that. And maybe even kind of tempted to play h4 even just to stop this knight from coming out. Could also just do something like bishop f4, but I kind of like the idea of restricting that knight. This knight is going to have a really hard time to get back into the game now. And here I'm probably just looking to go like bishop f4, rook a d1, just centralize my pieces. At some moments, maybe knight e4. Do I want to play rook d1? b4 also looks kind of good, just driving that knight back as well. Let's just make that knight go back. Or actually knight d3, but in that case, rook d1 would be possible, or just moving the bishop. And here I think I'm just going to play rook b1, because I don't want to play b5 and open up the c5 square, so I just want to keep control of all of these squares. So I have a huge space advantage here. So really it's just about maintaining control of the position. Now b5, this move really opens up this diagonal. So I could just take on b5, but maybe knight d4, looking at knight takes c6, looks even more tempting. And opening up this pin here. I could also have traded first and then done this. That also looks very good, because then I would be hitting this rook. So yeah, I don't see a great way for my opponent to defend c6. And I may actually end up winning both of these queenside pawns for nothing. Okay, rook comes up. Well, I could just play knight takes c6. This looks good. Hitting the queen, hitting the bishop. This is defended. And I guess I'll just take. Taking with the pawn or the knight both look good. I'll take with the knight, threatening another knight fork. So I'm already up 2 pawns, and black's pieces are very cramped. Don't really see a great defense to knight c7. Very difficult for my opponent to really to move anything, to be honest. Okay, so they decide to give up an exchange. Might be the best move available, but not really gonna save them, I guess. Let's bring the rook in and create a pin here. Okay, black deep in the tank. I think it's a bit late in the game to save this one, though. G5. All right. Yeah, many things I could do here. Maybe just go knight a7, take this, and win that bishop. Or win a piece here, essentially. Not really that concerned about this. G takes h4. I can just ignore that. Okay, my opponent abandons the game. I think their mistake there was, well, they definitely should have played e5 at some point before I got the chance to play e5. This space advantage was just too overwhelming. Really important to stake out some space on the board and not just get sort of squished. When you do have a space advantage, you can use a lot of patience, actually. You don't need to do anything too quickly. You just have extra room to maneuver. Okay, opponent goes g3. I'm going to play d5. Usually they take on d5, but all right. So now if bishop takes e4, it looks like I get to win a nice tempo with knight f6. I guess white could try knight c3 and plan to recapture that with a knight. In that case, I could consider f5 if I really want to try to hold on to that pawn. Looks like the opponent is disconnected. Maybe a connection issue. It feels a little early in the game to rage disconnect. Let's see if they get back. Well, I guess not. Okay, well, anyways, on to the next game. You know what? We're speedrunning here. We'll take it. Take no prisoners. Knight f3, back to the white pieces. Knight c6. This is a move we saw quite a lot at the lower levels, somewhat less so now that we're going up the rating chain. I'm going to go ahead and play d6 and start kicking this knight around. d5, rather. and can't come here obviously because of my knight, and if it goes there I'll play c5, and this is very solidly defended, so I'm now ready to kick that knight backwards whenever I want. And this is kind of the problem with playing just with the minor pieces with no pawn support in the opening, is if you just bring out the knights, pretty soon they're going to get chased around by the pawns. So that is why we generally do establish some sort of foothold in the center with a pawn. Oh wait, that's a tactic. That is a tactic. I was so preoccupied with thinking about a3, I almost didn't realize my opponent opened up a line to their king, allowing a very typical, very common tactic. Check, picking off this loose knight. That is definitely one to remember. That is one that comes up very often in all sorts of openings. All right, we could take this, bishop d7, queen a6. Yeah, I guess, I mean, you don't want to get too carried away with grabbing pawns when you're already up a piece, but do I want to? Yeah, I don't think there's any chance of my queen getting trapped, and I'm doing fine in development, so I think I feel fine taking this. I don't think I can get punished for it. And it might be useful to have that pawn. It would also be totally acceptable just to ignore that and just keep developing. But yeah, I think we're doing absolutely fine in development, so might as well just grab that pawn, take control of some more squares. But now we definitely want to get back to developing as quickly as possible. Something like g3, bishop g2, castles. And we are eyeing this rook here. So, okay. Up a clean piece. Basically, we just have to watch out for getting our queen trapped. So rook b6 is coming, but we could play queen takes a7 or queen a5. Queen still doesn't seem to be trapped, so I'll just keep developing. e4. Knight g5, knight d2, knight d4. I'll just go towards the center. And I am threatening this now. And also maybe thinking about knight c6. So for rook b6, I think I'll just go ahead and take on a7. Not so much because I want that pawn, but that actually seems to be the safest square for my queen. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and play knight c6 and force some more trades. So this fork, yeah, kind of forces a trade. And we are threatening that pawn on e4 as well. Obviously, don't blunder our queen. So I could take this. I could play queen a6. Let's just play it really safe and just bring our queen back. That's fine. I'm fine to give up this pawn here. I don't really care. And we'll just push that rook away to break the pin. This is an important lesson that's come up in a lot of these games, is when you're way ahead of material, don't get too sidetracked with extra pawns. Keep your position compact, safe, simple. that's the easiest way to win. And in this case, we are up, what, a whole bishop? So no need to get fancy, really. So, okay, we're looking at h7 here. Opponent defends it. Let's put a bishop on this. This long diagonal is looking juicy now. I mean, if black is not careful, that could be a quick checkmate coming in right away. Okay, they do block it. But sure, I'll just trade off bishops. And let's start looking at this backward pawn on the d file. Another tip when you're way ahead is, whenever possible, play with a clear plan. In this case, my plan is to increase the pressure on this pawn. And that just, you don't want the game to draw out and not put any pressure on your opponent and give them all the time in the world to drum up some sort of attack or counterplay that makes the game complicated. You want to kind of put that ticking clock on them where if you don't figure something out in a few moves, I'm going to get even farther and ahead. That just makes it simpler to play, and also to stay in reasonably good shape on the clock. If your plans are part of a coherent plan that fits to, if your moves rather are part of a coherent plan, it's easy to play multiple moves quickly. Okay, I guess my opponent wants to play h4. Not super scared of this. I don't really see any attack materializing from that. My bishop here is doing a very good job of defending my king anyway. So I'm just going to ignore that, and I'll recapture if necessary. Even if black could place a queen and a rook on the h file, there'd just be queen h2 check, king over, and still no checkmate. And here I'm even ready to triple on the d file if necessary. And if black, plays like rook d8 or rook b6, another benefit of having a proactive plan, if your opponent is forced on the defensive, their pieces are passive, it's much harder for them to do anything to you. So, okay, let's go queen d2, attack this again, force black to add another defender if they want to do anything about that. Okay, and now I'm going to switch targets and go after this f7 pawn. Also a weakness, I'm threatening rook f3. And this is a really nice bishop, just cannot be chased away by black's pawns. Okay, queen e5. Maybe I'll just send my queen over here with a sneaky threat of queen takes g6 check. And my opponent does run out of time, but in a hopeless position. Okay, let's keep the train going. Black pieces this time, 1400 opponent. And we'll go for our Sicilian again. What is this flag? Argentina. All right. Knight f6 does not work well against knight e6 because then e5 and your knight has nowhere to go. But against the Grand Prix, I am going to go for this d5 setup. Usually they play bishop b5 here. Takes. Now generally trading is not a great move in the Grand Prix because when you've played f4, that really softens up your king position. So generally you really don't want to open up the center in this fashion. So I could just play knight f6. It's also, you know, can I start exploiting this right away? I don't know. I'll start with simple development. It's fine. But, you know, thinking about bishop c5 or something. Okay, let's go bishop c5 and start eyeing up this diagonal. If bishop e3, I've got some interesting options like queen e7 or queen b6. This exchange I'm very happy about, though, because now my bishop is just cutting along this line, making it really hard for white to castle. Now this softens up this knight. Wow, that looks like... Can I take advantage of this with a move like bishop b4? So let's see. Queen a5, bishop d2, bishop b4, knight moves. I mean, I'm going to continue to keep it really simple, just even developing. Does seem as though certainly plausible that I could exploit this even more directly. Let's keep it really simple though. Just bring another piece into the attack and pin this. One thing I'm realizing doing this speed run is the value of keeping it simple. You know, not getting too tempted to try to exploit my opponent's play in a way that's too hasty. I've had more success keeping it simple and just you know, solid development, opening principles, all that. Just bring all the pieces into the game. If you play that way, you might, you know, the engine might say you missed a chance to crush your opponent in a more spectacular way earlier. But from a human perspective, I think this is a very reliable way to someone who's, you know, to beat players at those rating levels where they might be violating opening principles or giving you those type of chances. So as you can see here, really simple play. Didn't do anything fancy. We just brought all of our pieces into the game one by one. Not even really, you know, utilizing any kind of fancy tactics or something, but we've got a crushing position. And this is pinned, so that is a big, big problem for my opponent. And they do resign. d5. Will we see another Slav setup? There's a lot of ways black can play here. Knight c6 again, okay. Sure, if you've been watching these videos, this pattern, knight c6 being met by d4, is etched into your eyeballs by now. h6, this move loses a bit of time, so let's try to be a little careful. Whoa. g5. So I could play c4. I could also play knight e5 immediately. I kind of want to just play c4 because I think my opponent is going to play g4. And then I'll play knight e5, which is what I want to do anyway. So I'm sort of trying to bait that move. And in poker, we call that the soul read. I saw right into his soul. I knew what he wanted to do. The problem for my opponent is this whole operation with h6, g5, g4 doesn't really lead to any sort of kingside attack. It pretty much just weakens his own position. And this blocked a defender of d5, so I can just take that now. And look at this beautiful pawn center that we have engineered here. So one thing about the ready, you start out with knight f3, not occupying the center with a pawn, but sometimes you actually end up really taking control of the center later. Okay. Well, a move like e6 is kind of tempting, but let's do the same strategy of just playing it really simple and straightforward. And yeah, but man, I do really want to play e6 and force this king open, actually. So it takes like queen d3. I don't know. Maybe it's... Yeah, let's do it. This has to be good, just opening up this king here. With a rather transparent threat of mate in 1. So king f7, I guess, is forced. Then I could play like rook d1 or dx e6. Yeah, I don't really see a move here for my opponent apart from king f7. Because this is just going to allow my queen to come in. Although, is it even better to just take here first and prevent that king from running away? I think this is even more devastating somehow. So we'll give a check, and we can go rook d1. I'm actually just going to take this first. Obviously, there's a lot of good moves here. But this is kind of a nice position with all our pieces flowing into the game. And I guess black will be forced to resign pretty shortly here. Check or Ruski. If king c8, we've got a mate, but the only other move is queen d6 or queen d4. Okay, black does decide to give up the queen to prolong the game. I shouldn't even have taken that queen. I should have just ignored it, but, well, okay. Let's just bring the last piece into the game. Sure. guess this second queen should be enough to win the game somehow. And that's mate. Good game. Okay, we could maybe get to 1350 with one more win. Not quite, but we'll do it anyway. Knight f6 is kind of a tricky move versus bishop c4. We're always planning to meet e5 with d5. We're not going to retreat the knight. We are going to counterattack. Or just play d5 and hit this bishop. Okay, how do I want to block this? I'll just play knight c6, I guess. Bishop d7 is also reasonable. I don't really know what the best move is. Not too scared about bishop takes c6 doubling my pawns, though, because that would just give me a really solid center and the bishop pair. And now queen a5 check is tempting with a similar tactic to a few games ago. In this case, white has knight c3, but I could then play d4, and I do think that ends up working out for me. So this is a fork or double attack, and if knight c3, we'll use the pin to attack that knight. Now this could get a little tricky. White can trade on f6, white can give me a check on the e file, but I don't think any of that ultimately saves my opponent from losing a piece. And I think the simplest way to block is bishop e6, because it's nice that's nicely defended by a pawn. Bishop e7 also possible, but then in that case, that bishop is not very well defended, and I'd have to do something about that before I could castle. Okay, so I got my extra piece. My pawn structure is pretty messed up, but you know, it's worth it to make quite a lot of sacrifices. In chess, an extra piece is really worth a lot. And I can even think about castling queenside. Sure. I mean, the pawn cover over here is not tremendous, but it's sort of blocked in a way. It's hard for white to get at that. Okay, so they want to go here. Bishop d5, or maybe just king b7. Definitely want to get my queen back towards the center of the board. So let's play queen b4. Obviously, a queen trade would be great for us since we're up a piece. So white should probably try something like d4 just to, you know, they kind of have to avoid that queen trade at all costs. Or queen e3, sure. But I think now I am the one who can start going on the attack with rook over. So I could play like f5, f4, queen g4, bishop d5. Let's go bishop d5, and yeah, thinking about doing something like queen g4 next move. This actually can just be taken though, thanks to the pin. Okay, and the opponent resigns. Watch out for these tactical patterns. Knight on b5, queen a5 check, or as we saw, the same pattern with colors reversed also happens quite a lot. Let's see if we can get it up to 1350. Knight c6 again. So I hope by now you're getting a sense of sort of our game plan versus some typical setups for black. Against knight c6, usually we're going for c4 and knight e5. Those are kind of the two main ideas here. Could have started with knight e5 as well. Okay, let's do it now. And this is hitting this bishop, and also if we take that, then these doubled c-pawns can be weak. But if we drive that knight away, that's also dangerous for black. But I think now we just can grab this pawn. So queen takes or bishop takes. Well, if bishop takes, then there is bishop takes e2, but then bishop takes f7. Looks quite good. Queen takes. Both of these look good, honestly. I'm going to take with the bishop. And here, so I kind of want to hold on to this pawn. So I guess the simplest way to do that is just bishop f3. Okay, could play bishop g2, could just play rook e1. I guess rook e1 is fine. But basically I've just got a clean extra pawn. Just defend this and think about e6. If g5, well, that would, black is opening this up quite a lot then. Just move my queen out of the way, that's fine. And I am threatening e6 with a discovered attack. So my opponent kind of blocks that. That's probably a good idea. Knight c3, g5, knight b5, queen moves. I could also play knight a3. Thing is, right now, if my opponent played g5, I have this resource of bishop d2, and if queen takes, bishop c3. So I kind of don't want to block that, but I also don't really care that much. Let's do this way. So I'm still threatening knight b5, but leave the bishop open. And if my opponent wants to take there, I think I would be fine with that. So now we are looking at knight d6 check. And if bishop takes, that seems fine as well. Notice black still has the king in the center and this knight and rook stuck on their starting squares, whereas we're pretty much finished with developing all of our pieces. So I can answer that with a check of my own. Maybe king f8 is the best move for black. Giving up that, yeah, giving up the dark squared bishop would be very risky, but obviously this is also extremely risky, clearly. Okay, I can take this. I could pin. I'm actually going to take the pawn first because I'm still threatening this, and black's dark squares are very weak, so I'm... well, that just moves the rook where I can take it. Although maybe it's, yeah, maybe it's better to go after this one. Yeah, this bishop, I guess I can argue this bishop is actually better than a rook at the moment, so I don't even really want to trade it off. This is attacking all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I mean, we could trade. We could also keep the queens on. Let's go super mega boring. So we've got 2 extra pawns and a bishop in the endgame. And 4 connected pass pawns. Okay, I offer a draw. And we're just going to push those pawns to victory. Just gotta watch out for stalemate at this point. And that is mate. And okay, we have crossed 1350, and I think that's going to be the end of this session. Hope you learned something. Don't forget to follow. We are going up to 2200, and if you want to learn more about these openings, I've got the links to my courses in the video description. I will see you next time.